We'll go ahead and get started. Great. So just going over a quick agenda for today, we're going to give a background briefly of where this initiative has been in the past and what we've done up to this point and where we're at, looking at a zoomed out view of this whole program. Then we're going to go over the habitat and species goals that we hope the projects will address. Oops, just went backwards. Yeah, and then we'll walk through a couple project examples from when we did this work along Lake Michigan, and then we will do a walkthrough of the project worksheet that I shared with everyone last week, and then we'll give some more information on the technical assistance available to everyone and daylight the upcoming workshops, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers at the end. So if you have any burning questions ahead of that time, please just feel free to put them in the chat and we can get to them at that portion of the webinar. So first, I just want to acknowledge all of the project partners working on this initiative. So first of all, our funding comes from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. Ooh, feedback. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. And yeah, sorry about that. We're funded by the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. We have 3 fantastic different organizations offering technical support. That's ISG, Dewberry, and Limno-Tech. And we'll have representatives from each of those groups on the call today. And then, of course, I'm from the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, and we're leading this program with our partners at NOAA. Yeah, I don't think I introduced myself yet. I'm Zoe. I'm the Coastal Programs Manager from the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. You've probably all heard me talk before. So yeah, let's just get into this. So where we've been before with this initiative, the first iteration was focused on Lake Michigan. So it went by a different name, the Lake Michigan Coastal Resilience Initiative. This work we are just now wrapping up. We initially had 25 proposed projects from 17 communities in 3 different states. And they were highly diverse in terms of the scope of the project size, the approach, the nature-based solutions they were implementing, and just the overall resilience context. We ultimately ended up supporting 10 projects with engineering and design, and 3 of those were in Michigan. We had 1 in Wisconsin and 6 in Illinois. And we'll hear a little bit about 2 of these projects in just a few moments. So now this iteration of this work is continuing. As you know, we're expanding beyond Lake Michigan and therefore altering our name to Initiative for Resilient Great Lakes Coasts. This is a zoomed out look of this process. Right now, we are in this first phase and we're offering technical support here for filling out the worksheet that we released last week. Next is the workshops that we'll talk more about today, and then we'll enter phase 2, which is what happens after we, it's going to be just for the projects that are selected to move forward for engineering and design, and that will start in this summer. And yeah, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brendan.
Thank you, Zoe. So my name is Brendan Kuzno. I'm a principal at Limno-Tech and have supported a lot of our coastal restoration projects over the years. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how this fits into the larger context of the GLRI focus areas. And really, this is about identifying the habitat and species goals that NOAA is hoping to make progress towards implementing as a part of this project. So the habitat and species goals from the GLRI Initiative Action Plan 3 are shown on this slide. So Objective 4.1 is to protect and restore communities of native, aquatic, and terrestrial species of importance to the Great Lakes. Objective 4.2 is to increase the resiliency of species through comprehensive approaches that complement the on-the-ground habitat restoration and protection. This project is really primarily about supporting Objective 4.1 and really looking for projects that can help to restore, protect, enhance, and/or provide connectivity for the critical habitats in the Great Lakes. Next slide, please. So on this slide, are the measures of progress that are identified in the GLRI Action Plan 3 related to the focus area 4 objectives. For objective 4.1, there's two primary measures of progress that were identified. Number one is acres of coastal wetland, nearshore, and other habitats restored, protected, or enhanced. And number two is miles of connectivity established for aquatic species. So there's baseline numbers which are showing sort of the conditions that were identified in 2018, and the universe numbers are sort of the maximum possible that could be achieved under some ideal scenario. You can see that there's also cumulative targets that were identified for the current fiscal year. Every fiscal year there's additional cumulative targets that have been set. And there are numeric targets for the areas of habitat as well as the length of connectivity of these habitats for connection. The numbers themselves aren't critical for this particular project, but it's important to keep this in mind overall when identifying your projects that you may have, because these are going to factor into the project scoring and selection process later on. And really, this is NOAA looking for partners that can help in meeting these goals that could put and projects that could meet multiple objectives. Next slide. So the GLRI action plan specifically identified some examples of species that are important for consideration in the design of habitat restoration in the Great Lakes. So the fauna species from that list are shown on the slide here. And bear in mind that these are examples and not every project needs to use this exact list. But I wanted to note some key things that this list include several species, including mollusks, so the native mussels and the Chittenango amber snail. You've got 4 species of fish listed. You've got insects and pollinators listed with the Mitchell satyr, the rusty patch bumblebee, birds with breeding marsh birds, Great Lakes piping plover, all the way up to the largest mammals we have with moose. So the species that you are targeting restoration for can include a real broad range, and not every site needs to include every single one of these species in consideration. If you go to the next slide, there are some example flora species that are listed in the GLRI action plan. Similarly to the fauna, these will thrive in a different range of hydrologic, climatic, and soil conditions that will need to be looked at on a site-by-site basis, whether your particular project is applicable for these particular species or if there are other important species that could be restored or protected by your restoration project. Overall, the takeaway message should be that when analyzing your project opportunities and carrying into the design in the next phase, habitat design should include specific elements to restore particular species and/or communities. This could include choosing specific plantings, designing the site elevations and grading for inundation under varying lake or river conditions, specific spawning, feeding, or shelter habitat for fish species, shelter structures for mud puppies, specific avian improvements. So keeping in mind that there's a real broad range that can be implemented, but not every project needs to cover that whole universe. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Tyler to cover the first project example from the previous phase of work that was covered.
Great. Thanks, Brendan. So Brendan did a great job digging through what's our end goal here? What are we trying to achieve with these projects? So I'm going to dig into a specific example, the Lincoln Park South Lagoon, which was done in part with NOAA, Great Lakes City Initiative, and also the Chicago Park District. We chose this site specifically because of its use, conditions, and the large amount of public access and front-facing publicity for it. This site currently, as it stands, has a concrete block wall that encloses the entire lagoon. But due to deterioration over time, high lake levels, ice jacking, this block wall has deteriorated, failed in multiple different places, which you'll see on the next slide here in a second. With that, our goals were to really restore the lagoon with nature-based solutions. We saw a large opportunity here to go ahead and utilize nature-based features to replace gray infrastructure while also maintaining the existing feel and use of the park, um, and creating additional public use spaces. We wanted to go ahead and diversify the vegetation and create habitat for all different species within this area because it is a unique protected area just adjacent to Lake Michigan. Um, and then one of the big aspects that we had to go ahead and deal with was maintaining the aesthetics of the historic park. There are many historic aspects to the park that we needed to take into account. So if you go to the next slide for me. So existing conditions, what does it look like right now? As you can see from the image on the top left and a little bit of a time lapse, starting in 2011 and then to the bottom right, how it looked in 2021. These are all in the same location, and you can see how quickly this deterioration has progressed, and how, quite frankly, how unsafe it makes some of these areas for the general public to get right up to the water. On the bottom is another photo that was taken during a site visit. You can see how largely failed some of this concrete wall is, and also its proximity to Lakeshore Drive. So with that, we saw a lot of concerns and a lot of constraints that really helped us to go ahead and drive the design. The ice jacking with ice that occurs within this lagoon really drove the design away from a true nature-based feature, because they're susceptible to having the planes ripped out during ice sheet movement. Um, the sinkholes and the proximity to Lakeshore Drive really drove the design with the reduced footprint available. So if you go to the next slide for me. So what that resulted in is kind of a little bit of a unique design. Around the majority of the lagoon, we have actually specified a Flex MSC geotextile wall installation. What this does is this creates a near vertical wall that we're allowed to plant, that we put live stakes in between the actual bags. So you can see on the image, the comparison on the top right, we have just after initial installation, with the live stakes sticking out, and then 1 year post install, what that wall looks like with those live stakes that have taken hold and stabilized that wall even more. We went even a step further, and if you look on the engineering drawing on the bottom left, we actually have stacked stones as kind of a get down for the general public to get closer to the water and be able to access right up to the water. So we did a little bit of a hybrid gray and green infrastructure. What this does is this creates both terrestrial habitat and aquatic habitat, for all sorts of different species. If you go to the next slide for me, Zoe. The other design typology that we looked at was a more of a traditional living shoreline. And this was utilized in one of the larger green spaces. And we wanted to create a large amount of habitat, but also maintain public access. So what we did was we actually specified and we're designed a timber boardwalk and pier to go out to the existing bulkhead line. Um, what this does is it allows the general public to get up to that normal location where they would be able to go ahead and fish or watch rowing regattas, etc. But also creates a semi-shaded area for juvenile fish and birds and other inhabitants to go ahead and hide in addition to large sunned areas where all of these vegetations will take hold. Um, so if you go to the next slide for me. Yeah, you can go ahead and see just some of the renderings that we have done for this site. You can see the large timber boardwalk and how it is incorporated over that living shoreline. And then you can also see the cross section on the bottom right of what some of those walls are going to go ahead and look like once they take hold. This was a great project to go ahead and work with the public and to go ahead and figure out how to go ahead and showcase some of these nature-based solutions without taking up a large amount of space and without taking away any of the existing public amenities. Um, so with that, I will turn it back over to Brendan to go ahead and talk about Bayfront East.
Thank you, Tyler. So Bayfront East is another project that was selected for engineering and design as a part of the last round. It's located in Petoskey, Michigan. The existing conditions on the site are shown in this picture. You can see there's a large stone revetment that had failed during the high water years in 2019 and 2020. There was a lot of bank erosion that was eroding a steep constructed historical railroad embankment that currently has the Little Traverse Wheelway, a multi-use trail at the top of it. So the erosion was potentially impacting the use of a very popular tourist attraction and trail, as well as it completely disconnected the shoreline from the adjacent habitat in the park. So the proposed design, we ended up reusing the existing toe stones, but removing the steep revetment up the beach and replacing that revetment with a shallow sloped cobble beach. And as a part of that, the Little Traverse Wheelway would be relocated further away from the shoreline. And then we would support a backshore pool, which is one of the native geomorphic features that occurs naturally in this area, where the cobbles wash up to a high point, but then there can be wave washover into a more protected area that supports vegetation, and often has like dead trees or driftwood washed back in there. That's an important shelter for aquatic shorebirds, as well as terrestrial riparian transition zone. So if you go to the next slide, it'll just illustrate what the design looks like. You can see that in the drawing, the pathway moves back. The dark hatch on the drawing is the replaced cobble beach. And you can see that that entire railroad embankment would be removed in this scenario, and it would basically put it to its more biology in that condition. The entire slope up to the wheelway would be planted with native prairie vegetation. One of the things that was really important for the city and from the residents and other stakeholders that voiced their opinion on this was that the view shed was very important from the trail. So looking out onto the lake from the trail. So trying to create a native restoration project that still maintains the important park uses, similar to what Tyler noted in Chicago was the main goal here. You can see on the profile, the backshore pool, where we have a cobbled beach that comes up that will break any wave action and allow for waves to wash over the top of it and fill in that backshore pool during high water level events, high wave events. But for the most part, it remains a fairly protected habitat environment. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to talk about, or no, I'm going to turn it back to Zoe to take a poll.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brendan and Tyler. I think it's really helpful to give these examples so people can, see what the outputs would be and just get an idea of the kind of things that we work on with communities. And the communities are involved every step of the way throughout this process, as Brendan and Tyler mentioned. Really quickly, I have a poll. You can see the text on the screen. I just need to make it live on my end. And there we go. Okay, that's working for everyone. Everyone see that? Great. So yeah, we ask if your answer is yes, if you could describe your project ideas in the chat, and further, if your answer is not yet, if you have any other what else you might need help with in the chat, you can put that in there as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Michelle.
Thank Thanks, Zoe. I'm Michelle Platz. I am an environmental engineer at Limnotech, and I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so walking everyone through the worksheet and hopefully answering any questions you have about how to populate or submit it. So I believe Zoe is going to paste a link to this survey into the chat for those that may still need it. But if you click on that link, you should be redirected to this landing page that you see here on the right. And this just provides some general background on the initiative, including focus areas, as well as instructions for completing the worksheet. So a couple key points on the instructions that we wanted to highlight. First is that we're asking all worksheets be submitted by Monday, May 6th. You do have the ability to submit multiple worksheets if your municipality has multiple projects in mind. We anticipate that this worksheet should take about 30 to 60 minutes to complete, but you do have the ability to come back and finish a worksheet in multiple sittings if you need. Your answers will be saved as you go and be pre-populated into that worksheet the next time you open it up until you hit that submit button. And then we'll talk a little bit at the end about how to edit responses even after worksheets have been submitted. We do ask that your project team tries to fill out as much of the worksheet as possible. These responses are really key for the technical team to understand the project challenges and propose solutions without being able to physically travel to each of these project sites. So please do provide as much information as you are able to. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. And then we also wanted to highlight the project selection criteria. So projects will be evaluated for the following criteria based on the information provided in the worksheet, as well as supplemental national data sources that provide additional community context. So these criteria are support for native habitat and species of importance, project support from stakeholders, resilient planning and design, co-benefits, ecosystem services, coastal hazards that are addressed, project readiness, and the overall scale and size of the project area. So just to keep those criteria in mind as you are working through this worksheet. So I think now we're actually going to jump over to the worksheet itself and just kind of walk through what this looks like as you're going through it. So Zoe, let me know if this popped up okay.
Looks great.
So again, we see this this worksheet landing page, and a lot of this information we've already discussed. So I'll just go ahead and go to this next section. So here we have the project points of contact. So
Hey,
we're
Michelle?
asking, yeah.
Hey, sorry, this is Becky. I can see it, but a lot of the space is that light green. So I was just wondering if you could make thank you.
Is that better?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thanks. Okay, so this page is really just meant to gather all of the contact information that we'll be using to continue engagement with your municipality about this project. So if there is a lead organization, this primary point of contact, if it's relevant, if that contact has a title that you'd like to include, and then this contact email. So I did want to point out that this email is the one that we'll be using moving forward to set up meetings, appointments. This is also the address that a survey link will be sent to enable you to reopen this worksheet and make edits. So just wanted to point out the importance of this primary contact email. Phone number if it's relevant, and then if there are multiple points of contact that you'd like us to be working with, you can click this yes button and input their information as well. On the next section, we've got project description. So this is where we're just trying to gather as much information about your project goals as possible and your intended outcome. So if you have a name for your project, go ahead and input it there. And then we're asking about project goals. And so if you're kind of feeling stuck about what this might look like, we do have a hint here. So you can click this button and it'll open up some example project goals that you can look to for reference. your goals don't necessarily have to be the same as those project goals, but just to kind of provide some inspiration if you're feeling a little bit stuck on that section. And then the same thing for project description. So the more descriptive, the better. This is really where we get a lot of information that we use in our project evaluation moving forward. I will point out that there is a 1,000-character limit on this box. So if you're feeling like you're running out of space and you still have important information you'd like to share, you can click this need more space box. And a second box will pop up for you to populate as well. Again, if you're feeling kind of stuck about what to include in this project description section, you can click this need a hint button, and it kind of pulls up some example previous projects, including goals and project descriptions there. And then lastly, we have proposed action description. So what are the key actions that you are hoping to implement in order to bring about your project goals? So the example that I'm giving here is, so you're doing invasive species removal. So on our next page, we've got information about the project location. So here's just kind of a quick diagram about the various zones that some of these projects might fall within, from the upland into this buffer region, the actual shoreline itself, and then in the shallow sections of the lake. So we're asking that you just go through and select one or multiple if your project spans several of these zones. And then say you have something that doesn't fit within any of these zones, you can click this other box and it'll ask you to specify what zone you're thinking about. So the next point is the project area. And this is going to be probably one of the trickier components of the worksheet, so we'll walk through it quickly. But this is basically asking you to draw a polygon around your proposed project area. And if you have multiple components of your project, trying to basically draw the perimeter that includes all of those various project components. So to navigate this map, you can pretty much click and drag to where you'd like it to go. And then in order to zoom in, you just hold the control button and then scroll. So for my example here, say I want to look at something in the Detroit River, and maybe I'm thinking about the Trenton Channel here. So I'm going to draw this polygon around what I'm anticipating my project components will fall within. And then in order to edit this, so say I drew this polygon and I really want to move it around, you can click this edit tool here, and it gives you the capability of moving those different vertices on your polygon. And then again, we're asking to just describe the project features and approximate size. So say within this polygon, I had multiple components included. So I was proposing to do 1 mile of riverine aquatic habitat restoration, but then I also have 2 miles of shoreline habitat creation on either shoreline. And say I'm also working in the flood zone. So I've got maybe 10 acres of floodplain restoration that I'm hoping to do. So just listing all those different features that would be included within your total project footprint. So next page, we've got site description. So we're really trying to understand what is the current and past land use. So in this example, we're saying maybe it's a previous industrial property, maybe it's a park, just trying to understand what the history of that site has been. Is it a Great Lakes area of concern? So we have this map here of some of the designated areas of concern throughout the Great Lakes. And this is just a select one option. If you're not sure, feel free to say so. But if yes, we're going to ask that you describe the nature of this area of concern. Do you know the history or the pollutant that was the issue there? Also thinking about community concerns. So have there been any political or community concerns associated with the project in the past? So for example, were there previous restoration efforts that were hindered by a certain roadblock? How is the site currently being used? And what is the future vision for how that site will be used in the future? Is there an idea of what the end goal would look like? And then also a future site management plan. So who's going to be responsible for overseeing the maintenance and operation once the project has been implemented? So next, section is getting into coastal hazards to be addressed. We'll talk about this NOAA self-guided training resource here in a couple minutes. But this section is really asking for what resources are being exposed or undermined at this project site. So is it species, habitat, natural resources, cultural resources? Feel free to list any of those that you think might be considered. And then we go into specific coastal hazards as well. So each of these coastal hazards has a description here to provide some clarity, but you have the option of selecting low, medium, or high concern, or if it's not applicable to your project at all, feel free to select that as well. So in this hypothetical example, we're looking at maybe moderately concerned with stormwater. We're looking at a riverine system, so flooding in the river. Not really so much concerned with storm surge or wave action, maybe moderately concerned about coastal erosion. Probably not applicable to seiches, and then fluctuating water levels, likely low concern. So you can work through these different coastal hazards and think about what level of concern each has for your project that you're talking about. And then feel free to list any extra hazards that we might not have included in the worksheet that you feel is important to consider. Next section gets into project benefits and impacts. So ecosystem services, we're asking you to list any ecosystem services that your project will be influencing, and we'll revisit this again as well with respect to this NOAA self-guided training resource. So just go ahead and you can multi-click whichever boxes you feel are appropriate to describe the ecosystem services associated with your project. And then for every ecosystem service that you click, we'll have a description box pop up. So we ask that you please just provide a couple sentences about how this proposed project will improve the delivery of this ecosystem service. And then same thing with co-benefits. So what are these other benefits that will be provided should this project be implemented? So is it going to increase the recreational value, the habitat, improve water quality, provide some cultural services, multi-click there as well, and then providing just a quick couple sentences describing how the proposed project will improve the delivery of these co-benefits. And then also thinking back to those target species that Brendan spoke about in the beginning of the presentation, clicking if any of these are applicable to your project. And then as well at the bottom, we have an other option if you'd like to talk about a species that might not be included in this list. Okay. So the next page is about evaluating impacts to social, historical, or cultural aspects or assets. So we have some diagrams here to kind of help orient you to the type of information that we're hoping to learn about on this page. But is this project going to influence underserved communities? If yes, we ask that you provide a couple sentences describing how. Same thing with environmental or local, social, historical, or cultural assets. So if yes, again, asking for just a short description of how the project will influence those assets. And then lastly is project readiness. So trying to get an idea of what level of development this project is currently at. And I'd like to point out that there are no right or wrong answers here. We're just trying to get an understanding of how far along your municipality might be in this project process. So listing any project partners that might be involved. Is there an NGO you're working with? Or maybe you're involved with a local government agency. So just listing those project partners here. Has your project been reviewed by a regulatory authority? If yes, we'll ask, did they provide regulatory buy-in, or are you still under review for that process? Providing some information about other funding applications. So have you previously submitted this to a different funding organization? If yes, please describe what organization this was submitted to. It's okay if the answers, you're not sure or it's not applicable. And then lastly is project readiness. So just a 1 through 5 kind of rating of how close you think your project is to being implemented. So it can be, number 1, ready to go, ready for engineering and design, up to, number 5 being the concept stage. We're just really gathering ideas and still kind of putting our thoughts together about what we want this to look like. And then last page is about supporting site information. So if your project already has data that you've collected that you'd like to share with us to help us get oriented, feel free to describe that data here in this box. If you know that there's data that you are going to need, which you have not yet collected, go ahead and talk about what those information needs might be. If you've got a URL that provides links to data, or maybe you have a project website, it'd be great to include that here as well. And then we have an option to upload any site photos you might have, any data files you might be able to share, and any additional notes you'd like to provide about any of those pieces of information. So then at the end, we have this submit button. So say you've completed your worksheet, you're gonna get this submission page that's gonna confirm that you have submitted your worksheet. And then shortly after that, you're gonna be receiving this email. So this will come from me, and we'll provide this link here. So say, you've submitted your worksheet, it's been a couple days, some developments have happened, and you'd really like to edit your responses. You can just click on this link here, and it will reopen this worksheet and give you the ability to then go in and change any of your responses that you'd like, which you can then resubmit, and you can make as many changes as you would like. There's an unlimited amount of times you can edit your survey responses. And I think now we're going to jump back into the presentation. So as I mentioned, throughout the worksheet, you'll notice this link to NOAA self-guided training resources. Several of you have probably already seen this and taken these training courses, but several key areas we recommend utilizing the training to help complete the worksheet, if you haven't done so already, are the coastal hazard section, ecosystem services, and project co-benefit sections. You can go to the next slide for me, Zoe. So the training includes in-depth definitions and example photos for each of the various coastal hazards that you'll see on the worksheet. And for each of these coastal hazards, the worksheet asks about the level of concern. So this may be helpful for you to look through to just understand if this is applicable to your project or not. Go ahead, next slide. And then same thing with ecosystem services. So ecosystem services are the benefit to society that we get from nature. So an example is flood control and wave attenuation provided by coastal wetlands. So one helpful way to identify ecosystem services is to ask, if the landscape were in its natural state, what would it be doing to help reduce the impact of XYZ? And again, this training is really helpful for providing definitions and visual examples to help you key into ecosystem services your proposed project may influence. Go ahead and advance to the next one. Okay, great. I think now I'm going to pass it over to Sue to talk about requesting technical assistance.
Great, thanks. So we know that folks might have some questions as they're walking through the worksheet. So we are providing some assistance. Our coastal experts will be helping with that. We have allocated about 2 hours per project that's available. Could be done in multiple increments, like an hour as you're getting started and an hour later, or sort of whatever is needed. But the goal of the technical assistance is to help folks work through the worksheet, provide some recommendations, maybe help you think through a project, or if you're stuck on filling out the worksheet, help you get through that, or you've completed it and we might be able to take a look at your worksheet and provide some suggestions for enhancing and making the project description more just a stronger submission. So to request the assistance, you can send me an email. My email is here on the slide, and I think Zoe's going to put it in the chat as well. Include your name and your contact information, maybe a brief description of the assistance you think you might need, either just thinking through the project or working through some details or whatever. And if you can indicate a couple of days and times that would work best for you, we'll have one of the coastal specialists get back to you. We have a team of about 6 folks who can help with the technical assistance. And, if somebody's already familiar with your area, they may, they would be the person who would be helping out your request. And I'll also just mention that in the worksheet, there's a place for uploading files. And if your files are too large to upload right into the worksheet itself, there's an FTP option where I would be grabbing those data and storing them for the project team to review.
Thank you, Sue.
Thanks.
Yeah, if any questions came up while Michelle was going through the worksheet or while Sue was talking about the technical assistance, just please feel free to drop them in the chat and we can address them during our Q&A section of the webinar. Before I hand it over to our next presenter, I have another poll. So what kind of technical assistance do you think you'll need? You can check all that apply and feel free to add anything in the chat that isn't included as an option here. Great, now I will turn it over to Julie.
Thank you. I'm Julie Blackburn from ISG, working with this partnership in order to deliver this program to you. So I'm going to be talking about our workshops that we're going to be having the end of May and the first couple of weeks of June. And I know you're probably saying, oh my gosh, more workshops, more online training. I'm here to tell you it's an exciting workshop. And so we really look forward to your participation in that. We did have on our last workshop seminar that we presented 2 years ago with the same kind of process. We had great comments back on how exciting the workshop was. And we even had some people saying after 2 years of COVID virtual workshops and trainings, it was the best one they attended. So there's my commercial about making sure that you attend the workshop. So our goals for the workshop are to build awareness amongst a community of practice that are engaged in coastal zone projects for climate resilience, to share our knowledge of projects amongst all of the project proposers, kind of learning from each other as you go through that process, as well as spending time with subject matter experts that are really going to be able to help you refine what you're looking for, maybe provide a little bit more species information, give you some guidance on maybe sequencing of your project or what other kind of considerations you might have. So it provides you with one-on-one subject matter expertise time. And that's what people found to be really the most valuable for that. And then after the workshops, you're going to be able to go back and refine your proposal a little bit more in order to make it the most competitive for the next phase of the project. Next slide. So what we're going to have are a series of virtual workshops. There's going to be 4 in total. The first one is a plenary session, and it is going to be sometime May 28th through the 31st. We're still nailing down those times. That's going to be a 2-hour session and will be for everybody to join in. And it will be to provide that context to the forums, the workshops that are more geographically based, as well as any kind of information that there might need to be shared regarding how projects are going to be evaluated, what the future timelines are, various things like that. And then after the plenary, we're going to have 3 location-based sessions, and they are going to be the first Monday and Tuesday of the first 2 weeks of June. And so you'll only have one that you're going to be able to attend. We're going to try to make sure that we're having them geographically based so that we have the right resource people attending those meetings to give you that subject matter expertise that's really specific to your project. At the beginning of that forum, we're going to ask everybody to give a commercial, just like I gave a commercial at the beginning of this talk about the workshops. You're going to give a 5-minute proposal or 5-minute commercial of your project proposal so that we can all generate a better understanding of what your project is attempting to do. And then at the end of the forum, we will go back and have you review what you learned or what you are going to add to your project proposal as a result of that subject matter expertise one-on-one time. We will have individual breakouts so that each project proposer team will have that one-on-one time with a group of subject matter experts. And so it's really a great time that can really harness the amount of availability of subject matter experts to you to help you refine your project proposal in a pretty abbreviated time without having to travel or figure out how do you align your calendar to get with those subject matter experts. So that's my pitch. We'll have more information about timing soon, and look forward to seeing you then.
Thank you so much, Julie. I'm really looking forward to the virtual workshops. I wasn't part of them during the previous iteration of this initiative, so I'm really looking forward to it. I have one more poll for everyone. Let me just queue it up. Okay, this one is just a temperature check. How are you feeling about submitting a project worksheet for your project? And yeah, if you just take a moment to complete that, and then we can move on to wrapping up here. So just going over this timeline again, highlighting some important dates. The project worksheet is due May 6th, and as several of us have mentioned, that's to just get them completed ahead of the workshop so we know how to best organize the workshops and provide the best subject matter experts based on what you have been working on. The technical assistance is available now through June, and these are the dates that we're considering for the workshops. We're narrowing down on specific dates, and we will be in touch about that. So this is what we're working on, and then after that, we enter this phase 2 of identifying the projects, prioritizing them, and then moving them forward for the selected projects forward for engineering and design. Great. I just wanted to highlight a few resources just for your reference. We have our project webpage, examples of nature-based solutions for your reference as you're working on putting together your worksheets, and then just flagging Sue's email address again as emailing her is how you request technical assistance. And I will share these slides with the group afterwards, so you'll have these links to reference that way as well. Great. Now we have some time for Q&A, and we've been collecting your questions from the chat so we can get to those. I also wanted to just flag that we have a frequently asked questions document on our webpage, and I will put the link to that in the chat too. It's a great resource. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And let's see, one question we had from the chat. Would a beach restoration project be a viable option? Naturalize it with fish habitat.
I'll take that one, Zoe. So generally speaking, if it's like a straight beach nourishment project that you're envisioning, that's not something that's really in alignment with what the goals of this would be. However, if you're thinking of something related to like dune restoration, planting of native plants, etc. You mentioned naturalizing with fish habitat. It's something we could definitely discuss, but just straightforward beach nourishment is kind of outside the bounds of what we're looking to do. Any follow-up questions on that, Gerard? Looks good. Okay. Next question.
I also wanted to just flag everyone, you have the ability to unmute yourself. So if you want to raise your hand and unmute and don't want to use the chat, that's an option too. The next question we had, are only municipalities allowed to submit worksheets?
So the short answer is no. It can be municipalities, tribal nations. It could also be county land. We also, with Lake Michigan, had a forest district, was one of the projects that was selected for engineering and design. Also, one of the projects was a nonprofit organization that allows and promotes public access to the site. So it's a wide variety. I would say that the only entity that it's just state, if it's state-owned land, a state proposed project, we would likely direct them to our Coastal States Organization partner project. So we have a similar project to this, but instead of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, we partner with the Coastal States Organization, and we focus on state prioritized projects. So that's probably the only entity where we would point you into the other direction, but otherwise it's pretty broad. In general, it has been primarily municipalities that we've supported in the past, just based on who has submitted projects when we did the Lake Michigan work, but we're definitely open to other entities. And if you have, like, if you want to describe your specific situation, you know, we could speak to that too, but maybe that answered your question.
Thanks, Becky. Okay, the next question we have, what's the best way to share the Survey 123 worksheet form with partners so we can review and comment on it together? I think maybe Michelle, you probably be the best person to answer that.
Sorry, my audio cut out for a second. Could you repeat that one?
Yeah, what's the best way to share the project worksheet with partners so we can review and comment on it together?
Yes, so the saved option will be on the computer that you start that worksheet on. So we can provide you with a Word document or printed form that you can kind of use to circulate with your team. But then whatever computer you start the worksheet from is the one that it'll be saved on until you hit submit. So just wanted to point that out, that definitely consult your team to get all the information. But then, yeah, you'll have to submit it from the computer that you started on.
Thanks, Michelle. That's really helpful. I think having a Word document copy would be a great way to pass that information around and work collaboratively.
And Andrea provided a follow-up on the question about who's eligible. So we have, okay, so it sounds like it's potentially both private property owners and city entities. So we'd probably have to dig into your case further. We haven't, as of yet, we haven't supported a project on private homeowner land. If it's a mix of both, I think we'd have to dig into it. So it probably would be good to ask for technical assistance so that we can talk more about your case. Unless you wanted to add anything, Kiata.
Great, thank you. I think we're all caught up on questions from the chat. Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns, comments? I think I maybe didn't take a long enough beat when I asked this question earlier in the presentation, but I only saw a couple people describe their projects in the chat, but yeah, if you want to just give a brief description of your project in the chat, that would be great. So we can have early ideas of what you're thinking about, and feel free to add any other questions at this point too.
And I'll just reiterate, we're here to help with filling out that in general and with filling out that project worksheet. So hopefully the project worksheet didn't appear too overwhelming. It's a lot of multiple choice. So hopefully it's fairly easy to go through, but we are here to help, and we expect to help because that's what we've included as part of this partnership. So please do reach out to Sue and suggest a few times that you're available to get that scheduled.
And I'll just add that the technical assistance folks won't be able to see the worksheet if it's partially completed and hasn't been submitted. So if you are working through a Word version of it and could share, sort of your thoughts as you've been kind of partially thinking through things with the technical assistance person you're working with, that might be really helpful too.
Thanks, Sue. That's a great point. Okay. Andrew, are you asking? Oh, sorry, you're describing your project. Got it.
Sorry, I'll hop on and just say, like, I tend to probably overshare, so I can never read a crowd if this is a quiet group and you're just looking for people to jump in or what. But we're on like a tributary to the Grand River, and it sounds like you're shifting from Lake Michigan to the others. So I'm trying to get a feel for, like, is this something that I want to invest in or not? Like, it sounds like an amazing opportunity, but at the same time, like, I don't want to waste anybody's time if a tributary to a river leading to Lake Michigan is not what you're focused on, or if these projects are, I mean, if this isn't what you're looking for.
Totally understand. We're totally open to Lake Michigan. I'll say that first. For the tributary leading to Grand River, I think it depends on how far upstream you are from Lake Michigan. So is there a boundary, a dam, for instance, that is blocking? Could you potentially be benefiting fish species that are in Lake Michigan?
Yes, we're the last tributary before the dams in Grand Rapids. So, and our stream is pretty rough. It's pretty messed up, Plaster Creek. And so when they've been starting to learn more and identify sturgeon in the Grand River, obviously sturgeon aren't going to come in Plaster because it's too small. But our creek is definitely impacting some of the last spawning area of sturgeon in the Grand River. And last year we started doing mussel surveys in Plaster, so we know more about mussels. And the last, I would say, 3 miles of our creek, we have hardly any mussels, mostly because of stormwater. I mean, lots of issues, right? Probably affecting them, but midstream we did find lots of mussels, which was super exciting. So we're interested in doing stream bank restorations, continuing doing that in our upstream to try to protect those mussels and hopefully keep working to improve water quality and conditions downstream so that they can return. But does that answer questions for you?
Yeah, that does. Kiata's smiling and nodding her head, so it sounds to be like it probably would be eligible. But
It's exciting. These things.
Yes, it does sound, yeah. I think we as a team we'll have a chat about it and send you a more like concrete answer, because I totally understand wanting to avoid sinking time into something. Yeah, if it ends up, yeah. So we will get back to you. If you could share your email address in the chat, that'd be helpful, just to make sure. We'll take a look where Plaster Creek is.
Right.
Thanks, Andrea, for coming up and
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah, thank you. And great question. We're not scoring Lake Michigan projects any differently than any of the other lakes. So we love Lake Michigan just as much now as we did before. So,
Great. Thanks for answering my question.
yeah. Awesome. Well, we're at the end of the hour here. So if there are any additional questions, feel free to shoot us an email, Sue, Kiata, or me. Our email addresses are up on the screen. And yeah, thank you so much for attending today and participating. And we really look forward to seeing what you put together with your project worksheets. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.